Hey everyone, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. In this video, we're going to start a new series focusing on microservices. So what's a microservice? A microservice is a self-contained unit functionality that performs basically one thing and only one thing very well. So what you want to do is you want to create a set of microservices that you can reuse, on an ad hoc basis in your following projects. So for example, in all my projects, I pretty much always use an image uploading system, um, an email notification system, which is what we're going to make in this video, some sort of comment system, so creating comments and replying to comments. Things like that are very commonly used in my projects. So rather than rebuilding that functionality every time I create a new project, it's better to create a microservice that performs that functionality and then reuse that microservice in your following projects. So that's a very good way to increase your productivity, your efficiency, really get things up and running more quickly. Microservices are, I would say, a fairly new concept. It's been pretty popular in the last couple of years, and it's a good way to start learning how more bigger companies leverage their infrastructure. So in this project, we're going to create an email notification service, which basically does one thing: sends emails. And it's going to send emails when when you want to send a newsletter, when you want to notify someone, if somebody just signs up to your project. Typically an email goes out saying, please confirm your account. This can all be handled through an email notification system. So in this video, we're going to set up a simple email notification system that you can use in any other project following without having to rebuild it. So let's get started on that. You will need a few things, just to be clear. You're going to need an account on Heroku. So make sure you sign up for that. And then using your account on Heroku, we're going to sign up for SendGrid. And then we'll use the SendGrid email platform to send the emails. Now just to show you how it's going to look, I put up a quick demo on Amazon, and I'll show you how it's gonna look. So here is a very, very, very simple demo. So here, if I put in an email from a sender, so I'll put in my email. Okay, so here I'm sending an email from my company account to my personal account, and then I can press send, and then I get a quick JSON confirmation. And then if I check my personal account, my personal email, you will see the email sent, or you're supposed to, hopefully. Okay, and here it is. So this is the email I just sent to myself via my company account. And one good thing about this, or a couple good things about this, is that I can add multiple recipients here. So I can do myself, I can do everything by commas. So Katrina, and you can put in as many as you want, and it'll send all of those emails. Another good thing is that you can put in HTML, raw HTML in here. So if I grab some HTML from a newsletter formatted template, so let me find one right now. So here are some templates that I use to send out newsletters. If I grab this HTML right here, I can just go ahead and send that right here. So I just copied and pasted a huge chunk of HTML into the content body. HTML test. And I'm going to send it to myself again. And there's the confirmation. And then when I go back to my personal email, I'll see another one. And this is the email I just sent to myself. And this is just raw HTML. So it works pretty well. It's pretty quick. and it's a very convenient tool for sending out newsletters. Now, you may have noticed that the confirmation comes back in JSON. That's because this is not meant to be used by direct consumers. This is meant to be used by other projects. So in reality, we want to send all of this data in the form of a JSON object in a post request in an API call. And then we're going to get back that JSON response with the confirmation. And then you can send your email that way. So that's a quick way you can leverage a microservice in your following projects to send quick emails, assuming that you have the HTML prepared. So that's a demonstration. So now let's go ahead and start building it out. So open up your terminal, and let's go to our desktop, and we're going to create a project called email dispatch. Oh, I already have one there, so excuse me. Okay, and then cd into it, run the npm install as usual. Okay, and then we're going to use sendgrid. So they do have an npm library, which is very helpful. Okay, great. Open up the project in Sublime, same as always. And let's create an API route. Oops. Okay. Let's get rid of this mistake right here. Let's copy and paste the user's route content into the API route. And same as always, let's create a very, very simple confirmation just to make sure everything is properly hooked up. And let's go to our app.js and remove the user's route and install the API route instead. Go back to the terminal, run the server, check the home page, check the API route, and we're good to go. Great. So now let's start hooking up some basic functionality. First thing I want to do is hook up the email sending functionality. So we are going to create a parameter called action. And let's grab the parameter. Let's console log that right here. And let's do a quick check. Actually, no, let's just leave that. So, okay, so now if I go back here and do another test and add this to the URL, we have this properly connected. So if the action is send, here we want to send emails, send an email. So we'll put the JSON confirmation in here, and then otherwise we send back a fail confirmation because it's an invalid action. So right now our API only supports one action, which is send. So that still works. and that's good to go. All right, so now what we want to do is look up the SendGrid APIs in their node package to see how to send a very basic email. So let's go to our Heroku project. Let's create a new project right now. So let's call it email dispatch. So you're going to need a different name because the names have to be unique. So if you want to keep it very similar, then normally I put my initials preceding the name just to make sure it's unique to me. So that's one thing I do to make sure it works. Okay, and then make sure you have this set up in your Git repository. So before we hook up the Git, let's create a couple Git config things, files. So we want to ignore the node modules. So this should all be pretty standard by now, if you've been following my videos in the past. So we want to ignore the node modules, and then we want to ignore the .env. Okay, great. Now, let's see. Let's go ahead and do a git init. Let's do a git add an initial commit. Now that we have that, working directory clean, working tree clean, copy the Heroku command, paste that in, and let's push it up to Heroku. So right away we're deploying. Okay, once it's done, copy the live URL and make sure the endpoints work. Send, and there we go. So now what you want to do here is you want to go to your project on Heroku, and then you want to click on settings. Excuse me, you want to click on resources, and then you want to click find more add-ons right here, and then do a search for SendGrid, and then you want to click on that and scroll to the bottom until you see this. You want to highlight and copy that, and then paste it into your terminal, and that'll hook up the SendGrid module service on your Heroku project. Now, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to use another SendGrid account that I already have. I have one SendGrid account that I use for all my email services. But once you do that, just make sure everything worked. It should give you a confirmation response. And then you want to grab your, you want to make sure that everything works. So if you go back to your project, you should reload and see SendGrid in your list of resources. Just to show you how it would look, here is my project for Velocity. You should see this right here. Okay, so that means you have SendGrid hooked up. Now once you have that, you click on this, and you want to go down to where it says settings and then API keys. Now you're not going to see this here because I already have one. You shouldn't have anything here. What you want to do next is create an API key. And it gives you all these configuration options. Basically, you want to have this one, the read access here, and full access on the mail send. And then on top, I forgot, you need to give the key a name. So just call it access key or something like that, right? And then go ahead and create that. And it's going to give you an API key to copy. Make sure you copy that to your clipboard. Because I'm not going to do it again right here because I already have one. I'm going to reuse the same one. And then once you have the API key, make sure you copy that. And then go to your .env file and paste it in here as sendgrid API key, sendgrid API key. And then whatever it is from the API account. So I'm going to reuse one of my other ones just to show you how it looks. Okay, so here's my API key. All right, so I'm just reusing that same one. So make sure you have that. And then go back to your Heroku dashboard. Click on Settings. Actually, I'm on the wrong project. Let me go back to my email dispatch. Click on Settings, reveal config vars, and add the API key to the config vars. Like that. Here's the key, here's the key value pair. So here's the key, here's the value. And then make sure you add that. And we're good to go. So now we have SendGrid properly hooked up into our project, both locally and on the remote. Now what you want to do is we're going to need the .env module so that we can use our environment variables in the local project. Otherwise, we can't use it locally. So we have to configure it up here. Okay, we should be good to go with that. And now that we have the project on Git, we want to commit that change. .env. Okay, good. So now, finally, we can start using the sendgrid module. So we already installed sendgrid on the package.json right here. So we're good to go there. So what we want to do is go back to Heroku, click on Resources, find more add-ons, find sendgrid again, scroll all the way to the bottom, and look at the documentation for Node.js. And it should take you here. And then we already did all this. So here is one example email being sent. So highlight the entire thing and paste it right here. So if you poke through this code, you can pretty much make sense out of most of it, if not all of it. So here's where the email is being sent from. Here's the recipient. Here's the subject. Here's the actual content. Here's a mail helper class that basically packages all the information. And this is the actual request to SendGrid. So what we want to do right now is take all of this. We want to import the helper over here on top. But all these other variables are unique to the mail itself, the message itself. So here, I'm going to comment out the res.json and paste in the SendGrid sample code. And because I'm really uptight about this, I'm just going to work on the indents real quick. Okay, great. So now, one thing I want to change right now is instead of text plain, we want to make it text HTML. and hello from email dispatch. Okay, in here, put in your email that you used for the Heroku account. So I'm going to use my Velocity email. And then for the recipient, just put in whatever you want that you have access to. Otherwise, you can't confirm whether or not it works. Obviously, put in a test subject. And here, this is the code from the SendGrid documentation, just as is. You can leave that alone. And here is where they prepare the request, right here. And here's where they actually send it. So they give you an error and a response. All right, so if error, we want to send back an error code. With sendgrid's error. Otherwise, we want to send back a confirmation code. Okay. And that should do for now. So this is obviously all hard-coded. This is obviously not a real email. All we're doing is making sure the functionality is properly hooked up. So let's go ahead and give it a run, and let's see if anything crashes. So run the server, go to localhost 3000, and then we have the endpoint hooked up to /API/send. So /API/send, and we do have a crash. So let's see what went wrong. So right here on line 26, the error comes back as literally an error object, not an ERR. So, silly mistake. So let's try it again. So just hit the endpoint again, and we got a success code right here. So chances are my first email worked as well, which means I probably got, because this variable was just undefined, which means I probably got this email twice. Let's find out. So here it is. There's the first one, there's the second one. And it worked. So now what we want to do is we want to make this email action sent from a post request, not a get. That'll be better structure. So all we've done so far is that we confirmed the email sending worked. It's worth committing that. So test email endpoint. Okay, good. So now let's create another endpoint for a post. And this will be fundamentally the same. They're both going to send email. So I'm going to copy and paste everything at first, like so. So now the same thing is inside of a post request. However, this time we want to make these parameters dynamic. So what we want to do, we're going to hard code the sender, but we're going to rec.body.recipient. Excuse me. Going to grab the recipient from the post body. Going to grab the subject as well from the post body. We're going to grab the content from the post body. And then everything else should be the same. So now we're going to create a post form to send this email. So if you swing over to the views directory and open up the index.js, let's get rid of all this stuff that came from the generator. And then let's create a form. So remember, the email endpoint is looking for a recipient, content, subject. Those are the three form fields we have to include. So we want to have an input for each one of those. So recipient, subject, and content. We want to have that inside of a text area because the content probably has more stuff. And then a submit button. All right, let's just see how that looks on the home page. That looks terrible, but this is just for tests, so we'll let it ride for now. Okay, so now what we want to do is send the post form to our endpoint. So let's go ahead and create an action. That's going to be api.send. I believe that's what we called it. Yep. And then don't forget the method is post. All right, let's try it. So the recipient is going to be me again. Form test. Does this work? Okay, and there we go. Now, this time it went to our post endpoint, and all of these details should have been configured in the post form. So if I check my email again now, here it is. Form test. Does this work? If I go back to the actual form, you see the contents, right? Form test, here's the subject, content, content. So it worked well. So now if I reload, I'm going to test one more thing. I'm going to test an HTML email. So I'm grabbing a template from my series of emails that I use. And then I'm going to send it one more time. So I'm going to send it to myself. HTML test. Just paste in all that HTML and send it. And we got the success response again. That's good. Check my email. And here it is. So here's the email I just sent right now. Cool. So right now this only works one at a time. So now what we want to do is we want to create a utility class that will perform this functionality for us. Let me explain why. Because when you're relying on a library, it's more than likely that the library is going to change at some point down the road. SendGrid themselves changed their APIs pretty recently in the last like 6 months. So if you create a wrapper utility class around that, you don't have to change all the functions in here, which can be a real pain. You can just go into your utility class and change all the functionalities in there while maintaining the same names for your functions. It'll make more sense when we get into it. So right now, I'm going to commit these changes. Okay, so now let's create a new directory called utils, cd into that, create an index file, and then create an email utility class. And then inside your index, import the email file, and then okay, just a regular export, so nothing crazy here. And then inside the email class, let's import the sendgrid helper, and then let's export a function here called send email. It's going to take an argument. Let's call it email info. And then in here is where we're going to make all the requests, the email requests. So we could just copy this. Oh, one more thing I'm going to do different is I'm going to run this through a promise. So let's import the promise library. And let's set that up. Promise. Okay, so now we're running it through a promise, which makes things a little bit easier to set up in the implementation. So now here, I'm going to set up all the config for sendgrid. So here we go with that. Just literally copy and paste. Now keep in mind the email info is where all the information is now. So wherever it says rec.body, you want to replace it with email info, like that. Okay, it's a good idea to just do a quick search to make sure you didn't miss any. And I missed one, so. All right, I think we got them all. Okay, then go back to the API and copy the actual execution. But now remember, we're running it in a promise. So if there's an error, we reject with the error. Otherwise, we resolve with the response. And that should take care of that. So now we should be able to go back into the API and call the utility functions. Let's call it utils. Okay. And then instead of all this, I'm gonna just comment that out. We want to call, and we don't need this anymore. We now want to call the utils function, and it's called the email class, and it's called send email. And remember, it's a promise. So we do then and then catch. Okay, and the email info is the rec body. And then in the success block, we do that. And in the failure block, we just call the failure response. So message. Okay, and that should handle that. And I'm going to get rid of the get request completely because that was purely for testing. Let's give that a shot. Okay. Cool. And there's the email. Excellent. So far so good. So now we can get rid of all this other code because it works. Okay. So let me explain why I did that, because I want to tweak the actual sending functionality. You may have noticed that right now we can only send one email at a time, just one. And that's not really what we want. We want to be able to send 30 at a time, 40 at a time, 200 at a time. So what we want to do is go back into our index.htjs, and instead of recipient, we want to call it recipients, like that, right? And then go back to our API, and then want to grab the recipients. Our recipients. Comma, separated list of emails. Okay, and then we're going to create another function inside the email utility class called send emails and recipients. Let's see here. And then we're going to run through the loop of recipients for each. I'm just debating whether or not we want to do this through a promise. I think we're just going to leave it as is and then do the following. We're going to take it out of the promise and put it inside this loop. Okay, the from email is going to be always the same anyway, so we don't need to put that in the loop. That would be silly. Same as the subject and the content. However, these remaining pieces will be different based on the recipient. And then we take it out of the email info because we're running it through this loop right here. Now keep in mind, this is not a promise, so we're just going to do that. Okay, let's try that. So right here, we're going to do send emails, And since this is not a promise, we just leave it like that. And then I want to add the recipient. Now keep in mind, this is going to be a comma separated string. So what we really want is a list of emails, recipients, split, separated by commas. And then this will just give you the list, the recipients list as an array, and then pass in the body. Now there might be spaces in that list, so go back to the email. And here, there might be a space in here. So we want to do trim like that. Alrighty. And that should settle that. So check the server, make sure nothing crashed. Alrighty, so let's put in comma, and then let's do another email. So multiple email test. This is a multiple. Okay. Oh, so it didn't fail, but it did not work either. It didn't, here, I just forgot to send a response, that's all. So that's what I should have done. Now, however, this didn't crash. So in other words, the email might have sent. And there it is. So the email sent. So it was good. And then, and here it is to the other address. So don't forget the email was sent to two addresses, my company address and my personal. So that was successful. Let's get rid of all these tests. Okay, good. The way I designed this this function call wasn't very good, so I'm going to pass in a completion block right here. And then so here's the end of the loop. So we want to send the completion here. So you may be tempted to run the completion here or here, which at first glance makes sense, but don't forget this is inside of a loop. So what that means is if any one of these emails fail or any of them succeed, you're going to run the completion right away. So it's only going to run once, and that's not good. You want to run it for every single element of the loop. So just be aware that you want. That's why we put the completion outside the loop. And we don't even want this return, honestly, because if any of them crash, then it'll just break the entire loop. It'll break out the entire function, so we don't want that. So, and I'm going to test one thing real quick. I'm going to just put the sendgrid reference over here so we're not reinstantiating it all the time. That might help optimize a little bit. All right, and let's try it again. Okay, so same recipients. Test 2. This is test 2. Completion is not a function, so I forgot to pass in my own completion. So what it is okay. that I forgot to pass in a completion, so excuse me. So this is now test 3. This is test 3. Response is not defined. API line 17. Right there. Test 4. Okay, test 2, test 3, test 4. And these are all successful. And let me check the other email just to be really sure about it. Test 2, test 3, test 4. Very nice. So now let's go ahead and commit this code. And let's send it up. Now let's test it on the live deployment, because obviously that's more important. So same thing, live test 1. This is a live test. Email sent, and there it is. This is a live test right there. And here it is on my other email. So it's successful on both email accounts. And so now the core functionality is in place. Let's add some bootstrap because it looks terrible. So bootstrap cdn, copy the bootstrap HTML link, go to your views index, get rid of the default CSS and use your own. Okay, let's add some bootstrap classes now. And let's do a put it inside the entire column. And then let's do class form control classes for these inputs. It's going to span across the entire screen, so it looks kind of sloppy at first. And then let's actually make this a MD6 and then call MD offset 3. Let's put this header inside that column. And then let's give a background style. And class btn info. Okay, so it's good enough. Obviously not a work of art, but gets the job done. Okay, let's send it up. Alrighty, and then let's go to our live deployment and make sure it looks okay. And just for good measure, give it one more test. Last test. This is one more test. Got the confirmation. There's the email. This is one more test. Last test. Check the other account. Last test. Here it is. And that's it. So, oh, and you know what? It's actually a good idea to check one more test with, excuse me, the template. So let me grab an email HTML template. Just copy the entire thing. Go back to the live deployment. This time I'm only going to send it to one person because we're really just testing the email here. And then HTML test. Paste the entire HTML into here. Fire that guy off. And then check your email. And here it is, right there. So now that we have that hooked up, we can pretty easily blast out emails to newsletters. So if you're watching this on YouTube or Velocity 360 and you get a newsletter from me about a new tutorial or a new video or a new, a new like blog post or anything like that, it's coming from this, or my more robust version of this. But basically, this is how I'm doing it. So what you want to do next, what you want to try out on your own is calling these functions from another project by using API calls. And let me know in the comments if you want me to show you how to do that. Maybe I will. I would think that by now, if you've been following these videos, you should be able to figure that out. But if not, I'm happy to put together a quick demonstration of that. So so yeah, the idea here again is that this is good for usage in multiple projects. So hopefully you got yours working as well. And if you have any questions or comments, shoot me an email or put it in the YouTube comments too if you want. Actually, you should probably know my email by now because I just typed it in 100 times, but here it is just in case you missed it. And I'll be doing more microservice tutorials like this in the future so that hopefully you can follow along and build out sort of an ecosystem of small projects that you can use again and again in your bigger, more large-scale projects. So thanks again. Hope you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next video.